Hey guys, it's Dr. Chance Martin again from Haven Physical Therapy and Haven RX. Back for round two of these muscle in motion videos, kind of describing some of the good things they do and some of the bad things or the misinformation that they tend to spread. So, popping right into a lunge, and it's a kettlebell forward carry lunge, it looks like. Basically, the first part of the video, nothing wrong with it. Yeah, whenever you're doing lunges and stuff, those are the muscles you're targeting. And that's why lunges typically will make your glutes extremely sore the next day because you're really using those glute muscles for that hip extension drive right there. Yep, it uses the back muscles. That's a great point. Any standing exercise, no matter what you're doing, is essentially going to be using these core muscles. Nothing crazy informational there. This is the part that I definitely wanted to talk about, though. Yeah, dropping the knee in, where that's called knee valgus, where the knee drops in compared to the tibia and the ankle, it can be a bad thing. And now, this much that is dropping in is definitely detrimental. Whenever you're doing lunges and stuff, though, it's not necessarily going to be a huge deal, just because you're unlikely to tear anything like the ACL in this position. It's more whenever you can't control it in this motion, you're very unlikely to be able to control it in a box jump. And that dynamic loading, that explosive movement through the leg, if your knees drop it in right there, that's when you tend to find ACL injuries. That's why we, as therapists, really try to avoid as much knee valgus as possible, because they have correlated knee valgus with ACL tears in non-contact sports such as volleyball or even in football. Whenever someone usually tears the ACL, it's not necessarily when someone runs into their leg or hits them from behind, which that definitely can tear the ACL, but it's more a sudden change in direction that knee collapses in due to fatigue or just a poor motor pattern, and that's when the ACL shear occurs, and that's when you get that ACL tear. So yeah, we don't want the knee to drop in. It's not just the knee dropping in a little bit. It's what the concerning part is if one side really drops in, and it's how much it drops in. So if I have someone doing a lunge or a squat and their knee stays over their foot but drops in maybe just a little bit, that's not as big of a deal to me, because some of the thought process behind knee valgus being a good thing, or you'll even see it in a squat besides just a lunge, is what the body's trying to do is it's trying to drive up more forcefully. It's trying to generate more power. So along the thought process there is that using the adductor magnus, which it'll highlight here in a second, is actually a really powerful hip extensor. So it adducts the hip a little bit, but it also helps extend. So that knee is driving in a little bit to recruit the adductor magnus to help drive into hip extension. Another thing that causes potential a little bit of knee valgus is a quick elastic stretch response on those hip abductors, that glute medius. So if that knee's dropping in, it's adducting the hip a little bit, and it's causing that quick stretch response, which, similar to running, is going to load it like a spring and cause more power to be developed there. And a third common hypothesis behind why the knee will drop in sometimes in powerlifters and CrossFitters is because that hip internal rotation actually forms a little bit better of a platform for power to develop through that hip. So it's all about bony congruency. Whenever you rotate your hip in, you're getting a little bit more of that femoral head sitting into the acetabulum, that hip socket. And the more bony congruency you have there, the more power you're going to get through that hip. So that, a little bit of knee dropping in isn't a bad thing, but I would say this much dropping in is something that we would try to correct over time. So going on to the next part of the video, so right there, adductor magnus. As you can see, it's a little bit of a hip extensor as well as a knee adductor. So yeah, we want the glutes to make sure that they counterbalance the adductor magnus. They're both synergists. They're gonna stabilize that hip. But whenever you want to generate as much force as possible, because your glutes or your quads aren't adequately strong enough to get you back standing without recruiting the adductor magnus, the body's going to try to get back to standing any way possible. So it recruits the adductor magnus and draws that hip in just a little bit right there. And you can see the relation of the adductor magnus to the thigh right here. It does draw it in, but it also helps extend that hip a little bit, because if I were to pull that really tight, my femur is going to drive posterior. What should we do? this is the part where it kind of throws me off a little bit. Yes, you can foam roll, absolutely. But the thing is, there's not a lot of research backing behind foam roll, especially the idea of elongating these muscles. Unless you're smashing it down with, once again, over 2,000 pounds of force, that muscle's not going to elongate. It feels good, and that's great. That's wonderful. If you want to hop on the foam roller and do that for no more than 30 seconds or so, but please stand up and make sure you load it into that direction that's either tight or you feel like you're limited in. So if you're going to roll the adductor magnus, drop up into that lunge, add a little bit of weight, and teach that knee to stay out, and then you're going to get that reinforcement of that better muscle pattern versus thinking that smashing it for 30 seconds is good enough and then I can head home. Static stretching, it's not bad to static stretch, but the issue with this is, once again, you're not going to elongate this muscle. Static stretching does not make this muscle any longer. You can hang out there all day. The only thing that static stretching does is it builds a better tolerance to being stretched. So if I were to take this person, put them in anesthesia, they would have complete full range of motion of all these muscles. A lot of times you experience a tight muscle because it's, once again, a braking system. The body's trying to slow you down from injuring this muscle because it's not strong enough to go through its full range of motion safely, or at least it believes that. So if you hang out in this static stretch all day, all you're going to get better at is tolerating a stretch like that. That's not going to correlate to a better lunge position, and that's not going to have anything to do with keeping your knee from falling in during that lunge. Let's see if we can go back and kind of show that back in the beginning. I apologize, I forget which part of the video that was on. Alright, here, so stretching this muscle, it makes no sense to stretch it because whenever you're dropping down into that hip flexion, yeah, you're going to feel a little bit of stretch on that adductor because you're going into that hip flexion. And once again, we talked about the adductor being of course, squeezing the leg in, but it also extends the hip. So if I'm going into hip flexion and a little bit of abduction, which is opposite of adduction, I'm going to get a little bit of a stretch sensation to that hip. But it's not because that muscle's tight. It's because that muscle needs to build up a little bit of strength through that range of motion, and doing a static stretch or a foam roll isn't going to get you where you need to be. You need to learn to go slowly through that lunge motion, maintaining that knee out, versus hanging out in a static stretch all day. That's just going to, once again, build your tolerance to stretching. That's not going to get you any closer to keeping that knee out in that lunge position. Excellent. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I'm going to skip this next video, the ab. Yeah, it's a good idea to train your abs properly. Not going to cause severe damage of the spine. There is a little bit of shear force that occurs whenever you round your back. But once again, unless you're doing a lot of it and you're just irritating your back and your tissues aren't used to it, yes, you can irritate your low back, but you're not going to damage your spine or anything like that. If you want to be better at toes to bar, watch this video, learn how to brace your spine, and then drive through the hips versus that low back. This is the one I definitely want to talk about. This is one we see a lot in CrossFit, is the good old muscle up. That's a beautiful muscle up. You notice how whenever they go to pull, arms are out straight, and then they end up hitting their hips versus their shoulders doing a dip. And there's the good old chicken wing that you see a lot in CrossFit. This one makes me cringe a little bit when I do see this in the gym. It's not that, like the video says, it's not that it's going to cause shear or it does cause shear, but it's not going to cause a stretch of that anterior capsule once again. Because it takes 2,000 pounds of force to deform that 1%. So you're not going to get that kind of force to that shoulder. Although what it could lead to, and this is a good stopping point right here, it could lead to a dislocation of the shoulder. Now, I've seen that because it's pretty nasty. Whenever you have your shoulder forward like this, you have less congruency of the humeral head on that acromion right there, and you have a lot of force driving through that shoulder because you're trying to press through the arm to get yourself up. And there's only so much tolerance that this tissue can have before you end up popping that shoulder out of place. And it's a pretty nasty injury. It's easy to put back in, but it's not fun. And if you're doing the chicken wing muscle ups, please slow it down and learn to do a better muscle up before you keep doing more muscle ups. Let's see here. Yep. Make sure, because we have lots and lots of great coaches at CrossFit Republic. Make sure you reach out to a coach and ask them to walk you through the muscle up progression. I know that a lot of them have really good backgrounds in progressing and regressing exercise to where you can learn to do it properly before you do lots of it. So there's no point in damaging your shoulder and dislocating your shoulder if we have all these great coaches at CrossFit that can work you through a program to teach you how to do a muscle up properly. So please use them as a resource. Okay, on to this last video here. Nothing special in this video. All they talk about is instead of doing bilateral exercises, let's do unilateral exercises, which is true. I mean, you don't want to always be using a barbell overhead. You don't want to always be using 2 dumbbells. Working one side at a time will, of course, work your core muscles a little bit different. But that's why Macy does a great job programming in single arm overhead lunges and single arm overhead snatches and clean and jerks. Everything like that you're doing on one side of the body is going to train the body differently than if you're doing it on both sides of the body. It's common sense right there, and Macy, like I said, does a great job programming in both unilateral and bilateral movements. So nothing too crazy in this video. If you do want to watch the rest of it, of course, it just shows all the different muscles that are involved in stabilizing the spine. Once again, guys, thank you for watching the video. If you found this useful, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Feel free to share with your friends if they need a little education on how the body moves. And please don't hesitate to drop any questions in the comment section below. I'll talk with y'all later.